Welcome to room number 1. Today we'll be taking you on a trip through the late 19th century and the important events that occurred during the time.
Next up is the steel and oil industry. In 1875, Britain was 47% of the world's production of pig iron and almost 40% of steel. 40% of the British goods were exported to the U.S., which helped build industrial infrastructure. In 1896, British production went down to only 29% for pig iron and 22.5% for steel. The U.S. was now the world leader, and Germany was catching up to Britain.
The railroad was significant during this time period because it was one of America's first big businesses. It led to the development of time zones in the modern stockholder corporations and increased efficiency of travel and transportation of goods and services across the country. However, as the company grew fivefold, it became a monopoly and had influence over the government, causing little to be done to stop their growth and power.
The 1877 Compromise was an informal and unwritten deal that settled the intensely disputed 1876 U.S. presidential election. It resulted in the United States federal government pulling the last troops out of South. Reconstruction was officially over. African American rights decreased drastically, and this is often known as the Great Betrayal. Hayes would appoint the Southerner to his cabinet, and the South receives a little money for their railroad.
The technology in pop culture was significant because the new technology became tools for a more efficient business, and as the public's hours decreased and wages increased, the public had more time to enjoy leisurely activities such as drinking, theatrical productions, and sports.
Industrialization experienced a massive increase in agriculture productivity known as the British Agricultural Revolution, which enabled an unprecedented population growth, freeing a significant percentage of the workforce from farming and helping to drive the Industrial Revolution.
The Knights of Labor was one of the most important labor unions because it allowed all people to join, including women and African Americans, and had major goals of abolishing child labor, trusts, and monopolies.
The Indian Wars were various armed conflicts fought by European governments and colonists, and then later the United States government and American settlers, against the native people of North America.
Immigration and urbanization was significant because the sudden influx of immigrants to America scared U.S. born citizens as they were afraid they would steal our jobs. There were so many immigrants that there was nowhere for them to live, so they were forced to live in slums where poverty and disease flourished. However, in the heart of the cities, urbanization provided skyscrapers and mass transportation, further fueling the idea of the American dream.
The civil rights were fought in the United States from 1861 to 1865. As a result of this long-standing controversy over slavery, the American Civil War had its ninth longest U.S. combat force participation for 4 years.
The elections during this time period were significant because they were either highly contested or ridiculously unimportant. Hayes was nearly filibustered if it hadn't been for the Compromise of 1877. After this election, the Gilded Age began, and little reform occurred until 1896 when McKinley was elected. He led the way for businesses and the middle class, and was the first to get involved in international affairs and modern politics.
Farming changed a lot. From 1884 to 1890, horse-drawn combines used in the Pacific Coast and wheat zones. In 1888, the first long-haul shipment of refrigerated freight cars was made from California to New York, and in 1890, the agriculture became increasingly mechanized and commercialized. In 1892, the first gasoline tractor was built by John Froelich.
The end of Reconstruction saw the rise of white supremacy in the Ku Klux Klan as Southern conservatives rose to power. They had many goals: states' rights, reduced taxes and spending on social programs, but most of all, the abolition of many laws protecting African Americans during the time period.
New imperialism was important because this is when all the major powers in the world were fighting for land to gain power over each other in each other's countries in political, military, and economic ways. Most scrambled for the global trade or conquering smaller territories to make them their own. America's annexation of Hawaii in 1898 extended U.S. territory into the Pacific and increased United States as well as Pacific power. For most of the 1800s, leaders were concerned that Hawaii might become part of the European Empire's nation. In 1875, a treaty linked the two countries, and the U.S. sugar plantation owners from the United States came over to dominate the sugar industry. The United States annexed Hawaii in 1898 and the urging of President William McKinley. Hawaii was made a territory in 1900.